Star Wars Dark Forces came out in February of 1995, a bit of a Wild West time period for the Star Wars property. But after Timothy Zahn released his trilogy of Thrawn books, this reignited interest among Star Wars fans and also proved to Lucasfilm that there was still financial viability in these larger scale Star Wars projects. So the floodgates sort of opened up for a bunch of content to come out, books, comic books, and today's focus, video games.
One of George Lucas's side companies, LucasArts, known for adventure games like Monkey Island, had recently broken into the world of Star Wars games with the highly successful and critically acclaimed X-Wing and TIE Fighter games. When project leader Darren Stinnett was hired by LucasArts in 1993, he thought that sort of flight simulator game would be the kind of thing he wanted to make as well. However, after playing Wolfenstein 3D and becoming infatuated with its revolutionary first-person shooter design, he decided that would be perfect for his Star Wars game. Stinnett, along with fellow programmers Ray Gresko and Winston Wolfe, would design the Jedi engine, which, from the sound of it, is a pretty revolutionary 3D engine. I don't know too much about programming, but unlike other first-person shooter competitors, the Jedi engine allowed the player to move their view up and down, not just horizontally. It also allowed for objects in the game's level to be seen from exterior perspective and then later walked to and interacted with. The last guy I want to mention before getting into my experience with the game is Justin Chin, an artist who came up with the concept of the Dark Troopers, who would evolve into the main antagonizing force of the game.
For me, Dark Forces was always one of those old games that I figured I would get around to playing eventually. I did mess around with it as a kid, my friend's dad's computer when I was like 5 or 6 years old, but I couldn't even get through the first level at that time. But more recently, I've gone back and I've played through Wolfenstein 3D, Duke Nukem, and Doom, and I'm really interested in the early first-person shooter genre, as well as just wanting to go through the whole history of Star Wars games. So I figured with the remaster having come out pretty recently, it would be a great time to play it. And before I get too deep into the video, I just really quickly wanted to shout out my podcast that I do with my friend Ryan, the Beggar's Canyon Boys. This is a comprehensive look at the entire history of Star Wars. So if you're a Star Wars fan and you want to kind of follow along a bit of like a reading club sort of thing with us, then please join us, listen, or watch along. There's its own dedicated YouTube channel for the Beggar's Canyon Boys, but also they're available on all the different podcast platforms. Essentially, the idea is that Ryan had never seen or read or done any Star Wars anything, and I thought, it was kind of my responsibility to show it to him. So I'm slowly unfolding the world to him piece by piece. And we just finished our Shadows of the Empire episode, and we're getting to the prequels very soon. So that's very exciting. All right, back to the video.
Alright, let's just rip it open, shall we? I'm just going to go through the whole game level by level, hitting on general thoughts as I go, and maybe some tangents or something. Hey, I guess watch the video to find out. Like almost every Star Wars game, until more recently, it starts with the opening crawl. Honestly, I'm kind of glad they stopped doing this in more recent games, because it's nice to save that for the real movies, but I totally understand the desire, and especially with this game being something of a marquee release and landmark for Star Wars and LucasArts games, it's appropriate. So the crawl introduces us to our main character for Dark Forces, the light side leaning mercenary Kyle Katarn. Armed with only a blaster, this dude is going to steal the Death Star plans? Great setup for an opening mission, and immediately gets me excited to play as Kyle. One man against a whole army sneaking in. Very cool.
I guess one person can make a difference.
Kyle Katarn is an interesting character who, spoilers, will go on to have a few games following his journey. He doesn't get too fleshed out in this game other than just being a badass 90s dude. I see a lot of people comparing him to Han Solo, and I get it. He's like a smooth-talking, no BS mercenary, just in it for the money, and then eventually starts to care about the rebellion like another video game character I know. But I would say Kyle is presented as much more stoic in this first game, not talking too much and having more of like a Shadow the Hedgehog too cool for school type attitude. Before the first mission, we get the briefing screen that we'll see a version of every time. These are nice to give us a little personality and info. I also just like the design of these pages. They effectively feel like something Kyle would be looking at on a datapad or something. Anyway, off to Danuta. Let's get those boots on the ground. So immediately I turn off the motion sensor. Why is this on by default? I didn't even think to look at this setting before starting. I'm sorry if that's how some people want to play the game, but I don't understand why they even include that. But moving on. Yes, I love this. Modified Brayar pistol in hand with some crunchy, there he is, stop him. Nice death animations, MIDI John Williams, with some original music by Clint Bajakian, and some awesome early 3D atmosphere. The game gets off to a wonderful first impression. I also immediately pick up the Imperial Blaster Rifle and use it for most of the rest of the game. This is just objectively better than the Brayar pistol from what I can tell in every way, which is honestly kind of a bummer. I'd like to actually use Kyle's signature gun that he's pictured with, but it just kind of sucks. Pretty quickly though, we run into one of the game's most frustrating issues. Maybe I'm stupid, okay? Let's just get that out of the way as a caveat. Maybe I'm just really stupid, but I found many of these levels to be very difficult to navigate or find out where you were supposed to go. Now, I do believe some of this is intentional because of the nature of the level design going for realistic layouts. However, personally, it led to a lot of time wasting and wandering. It's not that bad in the first level since this is pretty small comparatively, but already we're having to learn what a door is. The game really consists of wandering around until you find a new area. I often felt like I was stumbling through the levels, just probing every corner for the next place to go rather than a clear path. And look, I know that is an intention of this game, the exploration of it all, and I absolutely don't want to have some kind of objective arrow telling me where to go, just maybe some balance between the two. But again, I will be super forgiving to the developers here since no one had ever made a 3D level before. This was a relatively new thing in general for video games, and Dark Forces was offering a level of verticality to the map design that was far outdoing its influences and predecessors. So after poking and prodding around the base, I find the Death Star plans and have to shoot my way to the roof to get into Kyle's ship, the Moldy Crow. I guess the logic is like the lame, even grimier version of the Millennium Falcon is the Moldy Crow. I don't know, I think it's a cool ship design. Here we get our first and probably beefiest cutscene in the whole game. This was also a big selling point for the game to have a full story with cutscenes, as this was not the case with the popular competitors. Here we do a little time jump to after the destruction of the Death Star, but a narrator tells us that there's a new unknown threat. This takes us right to the Executor. Oh hell yeah, and a new fangled looking ship in the background. Darth Vader. Yo, these cutscenes use a blend of pixel art and some live action on green screen for further away shots. Here's our introduction to General Rom Mock, our main antagonist in the game. He's super confident about his new Dark Trooper project, and Vader approves the demonstration. So the ship we saw in the background is the Arkhammer, and it's the deployment device for the Dark Troopers. They get launched down to a rebel base on Talay to just wipe it out. We then go to the rebel fleet, where Mon Mothma is all but begging Kyle Katarn for help. She tells us that Crix Madine, a defecting Imperial officer, has informed the rebels of the Dark Troopers. What we know now essentially is that they're just crazy strong stormtroopers. We also learn a little bit about why Kyle is such a valuable asset to Mon Mothma and the rebels. Not only is he a human tank, one-man army, he used to work for the Empire. He says he'll go investigate as long as his old buddy Jan Ors can be his mission commander. On our second mission briefing screen, Jan tells us that we'll be turning the power to the city back on and looking for Dark Trooper evidence. This level layout feels awesome, to be honest. It really effectively communicates the dreary and depressing vibe of a shelled-out city. I mean, look at these haunting skeletons looking like Uncle Owen and Aunt Peru here. Also, there seems to be a bar where all these stormtroopers and officers are just hanging out in the pitch black. Not too many gameplay changes yet, but this level got me even more lost than the first one, and it really only gets worse with almost every level. After finding the generator, the lights come on and we can explore the city with more convenience. We also get the infrared goggles here, which become vital as the game goes on. These run on battery power, which will drain pretty quickly if you just leave them on, but extra batteries can be picked up around the maps. After getting deep into the base and blasting a ton of stormtroopers, we find a prototype Dark Trooper weapon and make our way back to the Crow. So that level was really cool in the atmosphere department, still mostly straightforward and fun to just blast stormtroopers, but is that enough? Is this game fun beyond the base satisfaction of shooting people with Star Wars guns? Trust me, I totally understand why at the time of release, That would have been absolutely legendary, but I think that'll be something I examine as we continue. The combat isn't as fun or as well designed as Doom, so what does the game have beyond that? Well, it's puzzle solving and exploration, as we've already discussed, but we'll continue to look at if those things are actually fun. Okay, next level is where things really start to get a little frustrating. I have a lot of time for this game, I really do, but, well, we'll get into it. Jan tells us the initials MR are on the Dark Trooper weapon, which could only mean Moff Rebus, a paranoid weapons manufacturer. I love the idea of this, a guy trapping himself in the sewer bunker with droids roaming everywhere and needing to break in. In practice, however, well, the beginning is fine enough. We're introduced to the probe droid and interrogation droid enemy types, but then we get to the central hub of the level. There's a little dial on a column that can be interacted with to open up each of the 4 different waterways that circle this platform. It's not that complicated in retrospect, you just have to explore each of the waterways and pull a lever to raise the water level in this central chamber. There are Dianogas in the water and training droids floating around, and each time you're sort of funneled into the back of the sewer where you can be shot back through a little tunnel back to the start. But that's kind of the whole thing about this game. After I accomplish something, I don't feel like I've mastered an understanding of it, which maybe I shouldn't expect after one playthrough, but it really feels like stumbling through until I find something to interact with. Also, this was early on in my playthrough and I wasn't paying attention to the battery level on the infrared goggles. That contributed to my lack of having fun at certain parts. Well, once you get across the raised water into the previously inaccessible hallway, we're given the first bit of platforming in the game. There isn't too much of this, which could be a positive for a lot of people who don't enjoy the floatiness of games like this, but for me, a lover of early Minecraft parkour maps as a kid, I find this kind of platforming very fun. But I didn't mean to frame this as a negative point. This is fun to me. Here is some fun, like I was talking about. We also get introduced to the grenade-hucking Garns here. These guys suck, kill on sight. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention how health worked. There's green shields and red health. Most projectile damage can be absorbed by shields, and stuff like fall damage and melee goes straight to health. Anyway, here's Moff Rebus. Love the look of this guy. I wish there was some kind of boss fight here, but no, he just smiles at us. So let's move on. All Moff Rebus gives up is the name of a planet, Fest, where metallurgical research is taking place. God, while I'm writing this script, I realize how much I'm groaning when I'm like, oh God, this level, which I guess is a bad thing. Anyway, we're going to have to sneak into an Imperial base to find what metal they're using on the Dark Troopers. Here we go on Fest. I like the look of this place for sure. White, craggy cliffs and the technological base nestled into the mountains. As we make our way toward the Imperial weapons facility, there is some treacherous cliffside platforming to be done to find secrets and the like. A ton of this game is just fumbling around until you find where to go. It's a little bit hand-holdy, but I like when the game gives you obvious opportunities to use the thermal detonators. I like the variety of weapons in the game, but the detonators in particular have limited use in combat because of how easily it is to kill yourself or hit the ceiling when you're throwing them. But there's a nice opportunity here outside the walls of the facility. Once you lower this main gate right here, however, I ran into my first real, I am stuck, I have absolutely no idea where to go moment. I spent probably the next 10 minutes searching and checking the map for anywhere I hadn't explored. And eventually I came across this back entrance and we're inside the facility. But it doesn't get much better in here because the base is an absolute maze itself. I'm going to try really hard to stop just saying, and then I got lost and looked around for a long time, because I could really say that for almost every level starting here. This is also where we get the Imperial repeater gun, a great weapon that I didn't use as much as I should have until later in the playthrough. I should note as well that these will just be where I personally acquired the weapons, not a guide on where to get them, because the game will allow you to just not ever collect these weapons if you miss them, and then also give other opportunities in later levels for most of these. So I'm not sure if I'm getting them when they're introduced or if I missed the first showing and I'm picking them up later. We get a keycard and make our way to this central tower that has a fun little mechanic of moving this bridge around to access the central console tower. I'm pretty sure this is an example of what I was talking about in the intro with being able to manipulate interactable objects in the environment and then walk on them. I think this was a big innovation at the time, using switches and levers in the environment to actually move physical pieces of the map around. So once we do all that, we obtain the frick metal that is used in the creation of the Death Troopers. Now all we have to do is get out of the facility and back to our ship. And could you believe it took me way too long to figure out how to get out of there? Okay, the last thing I'll say about getting lost in these levels is when I finally would figure it out, or when I'm watching back the footage of me figuring out, there's never a moment where I'm going, oh, there it is. I'm so dumb for missing that. Yeah, now I get it. It just happens, and you don't learn from it. You just eventually stumble into the correct pathway or find a switch or a hidden area you hadn't interacted with yet. So now it's off to the mines in the Gromas system. Jan has found a large mining operation there, and it's up to us to sabotage. I like the look of this Mars-esque world. Once I get inside the base, I pick up a new weapon, the Jet Fusion Cutter. Looks pretty clunky, but I like the green balls it shoots. It works okay, but I really didn't use it much. The mining facility is a cool, skinny building with huge ground drilling stations throughout. I'll just say it again because I know I've been a little harsh on the game, but the architecture, atmosphere, and visual design are superb, especially for the time. This level is very straightforward compared to most in the game. Just sneak down into the sub-levels of the mining facility and place the charges. But here we meet the Phase 1 Dark Trooper for the first time. Very cool Terminator-esque design here, but I think it's unique enough not to just be a ripoff. I love the little shield and spike combo, but I am also a little nostalgia biased because I had a miniature of one of these guys growing up. Now we just need to blast our way back to the ship. Cool little cutscene here where Rom Mak assures Vader that Katarn won't be a further problem now that Boba Fett is on the case. Spoilers, Boba Fett is useless, unfortunately, as usual. I don't know why this series of events would inspire Vader to hire Boba Fett in the future. But anyway, the other part of that cutscene was showing us that Crix Madine is in great danger and we need to rescue him from the Imperial Detention Center on Orinakra. Jan tells us that even getting into this facility will be difficult, let alone getting to Madine's cell. She even points our attention to 2 elevators which will be essential to completing this level. Getting in proves to not really be very hard at all, but once inside this became a huge headache level for me. So essentially you have to make your way through the detention center until you have access to both elevators. Then you can position them on specific floors to jump into the shafts and sneak into previously inaccessible areas. You also get the packed mortar gun here, which will be huge when fighting stronger Dark Troopers later, as well as energy mines that are not very useful at all. I hate watching my footage for this level. These levels should all take between 15-20 minutes if you know what you're doing, but clearly I don't. I spent so much time wandering around trying to figure out the elevator thing, but whatever. We retrieve Madine. He's looking pretty well put together right here. Now he's ready to stand next to Mon Mothma. Jan tells us a little bit about Rom Mak. Says he doesn't trust technology, which is weird that he'd be building a bunch of robots. But now in order to find the robotics facility where they make the Dark Troopers, we're going to put a tracker on a smuggler's ship that we know transports goods for the Empire. Now on the Ramses Head. This level is another pretty straightforward one, a very welcome break after that last one. Just blast through the corridors, no big puzzle or anything. We track the ship to the robotics facility on Antivi, a frozen planet. This level will give us the gas mask and the ice boots. Neither of these items get much or any use at all, actually, after this level, but I guess it's cool to beef up the inventory. Antivi is a cool change of place visually, with its bright glacier vistas. It once again takes me way too long to figure out how to get into the facility, but once we start using these conveyor belts and work our way inside, it isn't long until we're placing charges around the facility. But oh no, Dark Trooper Phase 2 incoming. We'll end up fighting a lot of these guys by the end of the game, but I really like how they introduced both Phases 1 and 2 to the player. I mean, it's really cool how they build to the Dark Troopers, period. Showing the aftermath of what they could do to a city plants the danger in our heads. Then wordlessly dumping the phases on us one after the other is pretty cool. They just leave you to figure it out. But the Phase 2 Trooper is way more formidable than Phase 1. It doesn't have a shield to block blaster bolts, but it more than makes up for that with its ability to fly and powerful energy projectiles as well as a rocket launcher. But like, this is so cool though. I think the mission's over and I'm quietly searching for the exit when boom! There's the strongest guy we faced all game. But the mortar gun makes pretty quick work of him. Lots of levels end with a quick cutscene of the Moldy Crow flying away with a big explosion on the planet's surface. Moving on. Jan thinks Nar Shaddaa is our best bet of finding more Imperial navigation routes, so off we go to the vertical city. Let's see how this game communicates a whole city, shall we? Well, it's pretty effective actually. The wind sound effect and skyscraper lights go a long way to making me feel like we're sneaking around some scummy high-rises. This is also one of the more difficult levels in terms of combat. They throw lots of Trandoshans and Garns at you pretty constantly, as well as tons of energy mines that force you to go slowly through the level. Again, this level doesn't have a big puzzle as a part of it, it's more a matter of survival. I actually died multiple times because of enemies in this level, and they're starting to get pretty conservative with shields and health pickups. Anyway, we eventually find the nav card, but on the way out get captured by none other than Jabba the Hutt. Well, his crew anyway, he's not actually here, but he got Jan and is going to feed us to his Kell Dragon. I love how confident Kyle is here, just cocky through the face of everything.
I wish you were here too, Jabba. There's nothing like roast Kell Dragon.
We get all of our weapons taken and have to punch this thing to death. Another level now where survival is more important than figuring out what to do. I started this one over a number of times, but once you get deep into the level and get all your things back, it's not so bad. Jabba's ship is a really cool design though. I especially love the paintings and sort of cantina environments that come up later in the level. Well, we rescue Jan and are off to the Imperial City to decode this Navicard. I'm assuming this is on Coruscant, but they never say that in the game. We'll have to get into the basement of the Imperial Security Operations building to decrypt this device and find the location of the Arkhammer. Well, Jan was right. This is probably our most dangerous mission yet. There are some really nice moments where you're just out in the open and greeted by tons of troopers to mow down. It's pretty satisfying, and the courtyards and outdoor parts of the city are cool looking too. Get the assault cannon, fight more dark troopers, and then here we are at the most complicated puzzle in the game. This one is notorious. I mean, I was telling my friend I just beat Dark Forces, and his first reaction was, "Oh my god, that one room with the 3 layers of door locks?" Yeah, that's what it is. It's really not all that complicated, just 3 layers of interlocking doors that you have to get in the right order to proceed. But what is so maddening about these is the amount of backtracking required and having to rely on this graphic and nothing else. The rooms are so similar looking that it can become very easy to lose track of which layer you're on and what door is what. Whatever, I don't need to be a guide for the puzzle. The point is, it isn't a good puzzle that actually relies on your brain or thinking anything through. It's just trial and error, takes forever, and is very annoying. Anyway, we get the data card and have to return to the ship where Boba Fett is waiting for us. Oh no. Whatever, dude. The assault cannon makes him look like it was his very first job. So this is just convoluted for the sake of adding more levels to a video game, but apparently the only way to figure out the Arkhammer location is aboard the Executor, Vader's Star Destroyer. But first we have to get onto a cargo ship that's refueling and going to the Executor. God, this level should have been so easy, but there was a glitch I didn't realize, so I did the whole thing like 3 times. I'll get to it in a second, but we're at Fuel Station Ergo. Pretty much all you have to do is get to the end and get back, but in the middle here is this large rotating platform that you have to ride to 3 different stops before continuing on. And it kind of takes a little while. So at the end there's this switch to move the airlock over to the ship we're trying to board, but apparently I fiddled with it too much and it glitched out to where I couldn't open the airlock. This isn't that big of a deal considering how short the level it is and I can just restart, but it took me so long to realize that this even was a glitch and not something I was missing, so I went back and forth through the whole level multiple times before looking it up and realizing I just needed to start it over and speedrun it again. But it's not the easiest level to speedrun when you have to wait for this rotating platform in the middle. Whatever, we did it. Okay, now I'm on the Executor. Very cool to be exploring the underbelly of a Star Destroyer. We work through the hangar and into the cargo area, moving this big cargo along with us. Once we sneak onto this, we will be delivered directly to the Arkhammer. They kind of seem to have given up on puzzles and exploration at this point. This level and the Arkhammer are very straightforward in terms of where to go. The Executor one proves to be pretty easy too, even with Dark Troopers being thrown at us. The Arkhammer level, on the other hand, is not so easy. Let's just get right to it. Home stretch. We just have to set some explosives around the Arkhammer and boom, we're done. So this level just throws everything at you. There are tons of enemies in Phase 2 Dark Troopers, a lot of Phase 1 Dark Troopers too, and a lot more emphasis on environmental traversal than a lot of levels. It is pretty straightforward of where to go, but there's some treacherous platforming and risky optional pickups to go for. I found I had to be very patient and cautious going through this level, approaching every combat encounter with the intention of saving as much health as possible for the next, because there are barely any health or shield pickups anywhere on this level. I really like the design here and it's very fun, but I got to this final hangar area and died too many times. Before we get to the end, just wanted to shout out this cool puzzle. You just have to blast the buttons and get the lines in the right place, but it's very visually satisfying even if it is quite easy. So finally, after way more attempts than I'd like, we fight Rom Mach in the Dark Trooper Phase 3 armor. This guy has a good bit of health, but it really isn't hard to avoid his attacks. I guess Phase 3 is very similar to Phase 2, just with a guy inside and slightly larger. Whatever, we get to this awesome 3D model of an Imperial shuttle and escape the facility. Vader senses the Force in Kyle, some pretty epic foreshadowing for the next game. Kyle's presented with the Medal of Alderaan, and I think we can say he's pretty solidly in the Rebels camp at this point and no longer a free agent. Go, Moldy Crow, go!
Alright, at the end of the day, I'm really glad that I played through this game, but I don't think I can totally recommend it just because of some of its major frustrating qualities. If you're a huge fan of Star Wars or a huge fan of the first-person shooter genre, absolutely, I think you should totally play this game. It's very interesting to get a look at a shooter that has slightly different gameplay intentions than its contemporaries, especially when everybody was already calling everything a Doom clone at the time, so this is cool to see how they add a little bit of nuance to that genre. But I do think most of my friends would probably give up on this game after getting lost for a little while, and I can't really blame them. So is it worth playing all the way through? For me, yes, it was. The simple story and the amazing atmosphere, along with just a desire to play through all of the Star Wars video games and learn a little bit about video game history along the way, that's plenty for me.